Cults, Part 2. Let's get into it. Yeah.
Or the true Russian Orthodox Church. The true Russian Orthodox Church cult was a doomsday group that gained attention for the most unexpected reason. While cults are often known for unsafe and harmful rituals, this one managed to take things a step further. It was started by an already unsteady man who went by the name of Pyotr Kuznetsov in the early to mid 2000s. Pyotr had a history of mental illness and was an inactive architect who had just gotten divorced before he started the cult. His delusions began with a bizarre religion.
Well, that's always a good start. He had a mental illness and got a bunch of followers. So, that's always a good start to, starting a cult.
Just ideas which, sadly, are common among extremists. He and his 35-member group rejected identification documents, barcodes, and social security numbers. They claimed these objects were linked to devil numbers and satanic imagery. Things took a drastic turn when Pyotr predicted the end of the world. He believed it would happen in May 2008, and the only way for humanity to survive was to go underground. Following this belief, his group...
Why would they go underground if, barcodes and social security and all that is, of the devil? So they believe in the devil, so why would they go underground? Isn't that where the devil lives? I'm just saying.
Group of 35 people locked themselves inside a cave in Penza in November 2007. Ironically, Pyotr didn't join them. Inside the cave, the group created their own community, threatening to end their lives.
It's almost as if he didn't join them because he was afraid that he'd die underground.
Authorities tried to remove them. The situation began to unravel in March 2008 when the first 7 members emerged, unable to continue living in such dire conditions. Slowly, more members followed.
What kind of dire conditions? No food and no water? No place to, shit and pee and, the fumes from, where they're peeing and pooping, they're just breathing all that, stench in. Those kind of dire conditions.
May 2008, after Pyotr's predicted doomsday had passed, nearly all the members had abandoned the cave.
Good.
The final straw was the unlivable state of the cave, which had exponentially worsened by the death and decay of 2 members inside. Pyotr was eventually deemed unfit to stand trial and sent to a psychiatric hospital.
Oh, hell no. He was the cause of those people's death. Make him stand trial. That's some bullshit. I'm just saying.
Treatment. The Coconut Cult. August Engelhardt was a German author and pharmacy assistant who founded a sun-worshipping cult centered around fruitarianism. The most absurd part? Engelhardt and his followers strictly ate only coconuts. What?
So he was a pharmacist who decided he was going to instead worship the sun and only eat coconuts? Okay, that's one way to go, I guess.
While Engelhardt claimed to worship the sun, the cult's belief system essentially revolved around worshipping coconuts instead. Engelhardt had always been fascinated by natural living. Even during his time as a pharmacy assistant in the industrial era, he preached a pure natural lifestyle. He followed his beliefs.
Then why... Okay, if you believe in, your hippie, like, natural lifestyle, why would you ever become a pharmacist? Isn't that contradictory to, like, your belief system?
By moving to Papua New Guinea, going completely nude, and adopting a coconut-only diet. Eventually, his solitude wore on him and he longed for company. That's when he started his cult, the Order of the Sun. He wrote letters to like-minded individuals to convince them to join him. Many surprisingly did.
Who? Was it people he knew? I'm assuming so. Like, did he just get strangers' addresses? How? It had to be people he knew, right? Alright.
Brother Stair. Brother Stair was a popular evangelist minister in the 1990s. His teachings gained significant traction largely due to his convincing, though unfounded, predictions about the end of the world. He built a following around his skepticism-driven religious ideas. That's not what Stair became most famous for. Like many overhyped religious figures, he let his fame get to him and decided to form his own little community. In 1978, he purchased a motel in South Carolina and gradually invited people to join him in his mansion. Stair encouraged his followers to leave behind their worldly possessions, or donate them to his commune, which he called the Overcomer Ministry. By the height of his...
You can leave your stuff behind or, donate it to me. Come on. Give me your shit.
Influence, he had gathered about 70 people all living together in a close-knit, self-sufficient community. Roles were divided based on stereotypical gender norms. Women worked in the kitchen while men tended to the farms.
That's right, we'll work out in the farms, and women, get your ass in the kitchen and cook me a meal. That's very traditional of Brother Stair, I guess. I'm not surprised. He looks like he's about 170.
Alongside managing the commune, Stair continued spreading his teachings globally through radio broadcasts. His sermons were heard in multiple countries across several continents. At one point, they aired on 120 different radio stations. Things started to fall apart when Stair faced multiple accusations of serious misconduct. One involved his refusal to allow members of his community to seek modern medical care, which tragically led to the deaths of 2 children. Another was his blatant abuse and misconduct toward women during sermons, some of which were even caught on camera. Stair pleaded guilty to the allegations and was released on a $750,000 bond a month later. He passed away in 2021 at his home in South Carolina.
At the age of 217.
Ellen Boarding School. The Ellen School was a behavior modification boarding school in Poland, Maine, that had come under fire for its absolutely maniacal practices. One could go as far as to consider the school's policies a copycat of the Synanon cult. The Ellen School was founded in 1970 by Joe Ritchie. Joe was a drug addict who had become clean and was now willing to help people do the same. His vision for this school was precisely that, to help troubled young people become the best versions of themselves. Unfortunately, the methods they employed were anything but ethical. The school became notorious for its vile disciplinary tactics. One infamous program mirrored the Synanon game. In it, a student would be publicly humiliated by their peers only to be followed by excessive compliments and affirmations. It was an absolutely cruel psychological push and pull. Ellen operated more like a twisted social experiment than a school. Students were subjected to a regimen of confrontational therapies, humiliation rituals, and straight up physical violence. Former students recounted punishments like cleaning urinals with toothbrushes. For the truly
So they were like forced to bully each other, like psychologically, and like were they forced to like fight each other, or like were they abused by like the officials? Either way, it's fucked up, but I'm just curious.
misbehaving, the school had a boxing ring where students were forced to fight, sometimes to the brink of serious harm. It was less of a behavioral correction center and more of a fight club. And if that
Okay, that seems like they're making them fight each other. This is fucked up, man.
wasn't enough, Ellen had a dark past and got darker with time. While many deaths were reportedly linked to the institution, one case in particular pushed Ellen into the public spotlight. Michael Skakel was a student at the school who had confessed to the brutal murder of Martha Moxley. Witnesses claimed Skakel bragged about the murder, saying, "I'm a Kennedy, so I'll get away with it." And indeed, he was a Kennedy. Skakel was eventually sentenced to 20 years in prison, although his conviction was overturned years later. By the 2000s, Ellen's twisted methods were coming out into the spotlight, or rather, the internet was finally exposing them for what they were. Multiple former students and victims came out to share their stories of the abuse and trauma. Eventually, by 2011, after years of mounting pressure, the school was finally shut down. NXIVM. NXIVM was a personal growth MLM company.
I remember when this broke. It was like in 2017 or 18 maybe. Cause like, wasn't this the thing that the Smallville chick was involved in?
Founded by the self-proclaimed genius Keith Raniere. At its core, NXIVM posed as a self-help empire. It offered these curricula called executive success programs to help people live their best lives. However, like a textbook narcissistic cult leader, Keith Raniere was way more than met the eye. He took his little 5 minutes.
Side note, this dude way looks like Stephen King.
Of fame to heart and turned NXIVM into a very revolting cult. At first glance, NXIVM operated like a multi-level marketing company, or simply put, a pyramid scheme. But its real horror show was something called the DOS, short for Dominus Obsequious Sororium, or Lord over Obedient Women. It was a disgusting, secretive, all-female inner circle marked as a mentorship program. In reality, DOS was a highly abusive system targeting women. The program involved actual female victims, blackmailed with collateral such as explicit photos. These women were branded with Raniere's initials and coerced into sexual relationships with higher-ranking men. NXIVM fell apart when brave victims exposed the inner workings of the company/cult in 2017.
I want to make sure.
Multiple actresses came out to the public to show the Raniere's brand forced on them. This was when the FBI had enough and finally swooped in. Raniere was arrested, and in 2020 he got 120 years in prison, alongside other high-ranking, one of which was actress Allison Mack, members.
Yeah, because she was helping him traffic girls. Like, she was his Ghislaine Maxwell, basically. I wanted to make sure that this was that thing. But yeah, she was helping him traffic girls in for him to do, like, this shit.
Who faced serious charges. Next time, though, If someone offers you personal growth through a pyramid scheme, maybe just read a self-help book instead. It's cheaper and way less creepy. Level 7M Films. The Wilking sisters were an up-and-coming TikTok dance duo that had garnered a considerable following early on. They had dominated the TikTok dance scene in 2020 and had appeared in numerous collaborations with high-profile influencers of the time. However, by 2022, a series of alarming events brought the sisters into the spotlight for reasons far from their dance moves. In 2022, one of the sisters, Melanie Wilking, came on TikTok Live and implored her audience for help. Her reason? According to her, Miranda Wilking, now Miranda Derrick, had fallen victim to a religious cult and was not in control of her life. This little inner tidbit of their lives shocked the followers and quickly went viral. The story gained so much traction that it led to a 3-part Netflix docuseries deep diving into the alleged cult Miranda was a part of. On the surface, the cult wasn't a cult at all, but a talent agency called 7M Films. It was run by a man named Robert Shin, who was also apparently a pastor. The agency promised to elevate young TikTokers to new heights of global and financial success, and many prominent creators were signed under its management. That's where the victims started to come out about their experience with 7M. Some alleged that the agency was a covert cult that not only forced religious views on its artists, but also blatantly mistreated them. Allegations included artists being forced to give 80% of their income to a church associated with the agency, along with other forms of mistreatment and coercion. The most disturbing was the accusations of multiple forms of abuse against Robert Shin. He was reported to have been forcing his artists to cut contact with their families in order to save them from the punishment of the afterlife. As the controversy unfolded, Miranda denied her sister's claim.
Of course, it's always cutting ties with your family, but how's that work? Cut ties with your family or your afterlife is doomed. I want to know how that conversation goes.
She maintained that she was simply pursuing her career under 7M Films management, and everything her family had claimed was only because of some personal dispute. However, we don't really know how true this statement is pertaining to the multiple other victims of the agency. North Tennessee Cult. The North Tennessee Cult, also known as the North Shields Death Cult, was a small, sadistic group of individuals with a disturbing appetite for cruelty. Though often referred to as a cult, the group functioned more like a small joint living space under the leadership of a man called Zahid Zaman. Zahid Zaman was a fraudster turned murderer who had acquired a pair of houses in the small town of Percy, Maine in North England. Soon after moving there, Zaman managed to gather a few people to room with him in the two houses. On the surface, Zaman was the polar opposite of dangerous. He was a wheelchair-bound man with a keen love for animals and helping people. However, that facade was only kept up for the community around him. In reality, Zahid Zaman was a sadistic predator who had a thing for hurting people. His victim was unfortunately a vulnerable person with learning disabilities called James Prout. Prout was a recently homeless man who had met Zaman in a soup kitchen in the Newcastle city center. Desperate for a roof over his head, Prout immediately accepted Zaman's offer of living with him in his two houses.
This, aren't I?
However, that was unfortunately the beginning of months of vicious abuse that ultimately led...
Like anything that involves, like, mentally disabled people, like, being taken advantage of, or, like, being mentally or physically harmed, like, I'm gonna hate this.
Led to Prout's death. Zaman and his lackeys would openly abuse Prout during his stay with them. It started with them starving and physically assaulting Prout, but escalated to absolutely disgusting lengths. The beatings were followed by Zaman pulling Prout's teeth out, stabbing him with sharp objects and making him perform vile acts. This ultimately took too much toll on Prout's body, and he ended up succumbing to his abuse-inflicted injuries. You'd think the abuse would stop after the victim was dead. But no, in this case, Zaman and his followers discarded Prout's body in a wasteland and took his bank details to scam thousands of pounds from his account. The body was discovered a month later, and 4 people in the group were arrested. All 4 faced different sentences, with Zaman receiving a life sentence in prison.
Yeah, I was right. I hated that. That wasn't good.
Level 6. The Manson family. Perhaps one of the most sensationalized cults in the world is the one that went by the name of the Manson family. It was started in the late 1960s by a man called Charles Manson. Known for his charisma and manipulative skills, Manson managed to assemble a following that carried out horrific crimes under his command. Charles Manson was an aspiring musician and seasoned manipulator who had gone through a bit of a rough patch in his life. He had a very troubling childhood and had already accumulated a series of serious crime allegations against him even before he started the cult. After being released from jail for the second time in 1967, Manson moved to San Francisco. He settled into the residence of a woman, and in the near future partner, named Mary Brunner, later bringing in 18 more women. The hippie movement was at an all-time high at the time, so their odd communal living did not raise many suspicions. As mentioned before, Manson was an aspiring musician with a knack for making good music. This catapulted him into getting acquainted with multiple big names of the times, including Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys. A music teacher by the name of Gary Hinman introduced Manson to Wilson, and the two hit it off instantly. Wilson later brought Manson into his world and connected him to a big producer, Terry.
Dude, like, Wilson and, Manson were jamming together and stuff, and, like, he could have actually made it big, but, like, he was too controlling with his music, and, like, the producer was not willing to work with him, and so he fucked up his chance to be, like, a big, like, music person.
Melker. After some thorough deliberation, Melker ultimately decided not to work with Manson. Shortly after, he moved out of his house in Cielo Drive and rented the apartment to Manson's first group of victims. Actress Sharon Tate, wife of director Robert Polanski, and her small group of friends. Manson's beliefs centered on a bizarre...
I think Sharon Tate's the one that he told his group to make it witchy.
Apocalyptic theory he called Helter Skelter, inspired by the Beatles. He thought a race war was coming and believed these murders would spark it. Drugs like LSD played a huge role in maintaining his control over the group, breaking down their ability to question his twisted ideology. Manson started his killing spree by ordering his followers to kill Hinman in July 1969. He sent 3 of his most trusted followers, Atkins, Bobby Busolile, and Mary Brunner, to get rid of Hinman and steal all his money, which they very thoroughly did. Manson himself was present at the crime scene. The second set of murders he orchestrated were the Tate LaBianca murders. On August 8, 1969, Manson ordered another set of his followers to go to the Cielo Drive and murder everyone there. Manson told them to make it as gruesome as possible. All 5 people present at the residence were brutally killed on that horrific night. This time, Manson himself wasn't present. Manson was reportedly dissatisfied with the results and orchestrated another attack the next night. This time, Leno and Rosemary LaBianca were stabbed to death in their Los Angeles home with chilling messages written in their blood. These murders solidified the Manson family as one of history's
Maybe that's the one that I'm thinking of, where he said to make it witchy, because I remember that, like, something was written in blood.
History's most deranged cults. He and his group of misfits were sentenced to life in prison. Adolfo Constanzo and the Narco-Satanists. Perhaps one of the most horrifying cults in history was led by a man called Adolfo Constanzo. He was a self-proclaimed witch doctor who blended the occult with Mexico's ever-growing drug trade industry. Constanzo, like 99% of other cult leaders, was known for his charisma and mastery of manipulation. He built a following around his occult teachings that committed unspeakable crimes in the name of power and protection. Constanzo was born in Miami in 1962 and was introduced to dark rituals from a young age. His stepfather was involved in Palo Mayombe, a religion that involved rituals using human and animal remains.
Oh, cool.
In the mid-1980s, he had moved to Mexico City, where he gained a ton of wealthy clients, including cartel members and politicians, all by performing spells for protection and success. To maintain his aura of power, Constanzo formed his cult, later sensationalized by the media as the Narco-Satanists. He did it with his lover Sarah Aldrete and several loyal followers. Initially, the group sacrificed animals, but they quickly escalated to human victims. Constanzo claimed the more extreme the offering, the more powerful the results. Their crimes reached a horrifying peak in 1989 when they...
So, I guess he was saying the fresher the body, the more powerful his spell is. Okay. If you say so, bro.
abducted Mark Kilroy, an American college student, on spring break. Kilroy was tortured and sacrificed in one of Constanzo's rituals, which prompted a massive investigation. When authorities raided the group's ranch, they discovered a cauldron filled with human remains and a mass grave of mutilated bodies. Constanzo fled to Mexico City, but was cornered by police weeks later. Because he was unwilling to face arrest, he ordered one of his followers to kill him point blank, which the latter did. The rest of the 14 members of his cult were arrested and convicted, including Sarah Aldrete. Kirtland Cult. Jeffrey Lundgren was a self-proclaimed man of God who claimed to have visions and direct spiritual connections with divine powers. He was devoted to spreading this divine message and sought to do so by joining the RLDS Church in Ohio, Missouri, a Latter-day Saint group now known as the Community of Christ. Unfortunately, his rise to the position of a minister in the RLDS was cut short when he was rejected by the church. Absolutely galled by this, Lundgren did the only thing he could think of: create an offshoot of the group and ultimately turn it into a malicious cult. He moved his family into a farmhouse located in Missouri and eventually started to tempt susceptible people into joining him on his mission. One such family was the Avery family. They were devoted parents with 3 daughters who had lived pretty normal lives before they were, unfortunately, caught in the cult's web. Dennis Avery and his family were so entranced by Lundgren's passion that they left everything behind and moved to his farmhouse. In his teachings, Lundgren propagated the idea that he and his followers had to take back the Kirtland Temple from the RLDS. They came up with an extensive plan, but backed out just in time. Time for what? For the brutal murder of the entire Avery family. Instead of reclaiming the temple, Lundgren, his family, and his brainwashed supporters killed the Avery family under the guise of a dinner invitation. They dug a 6'7" pit in Lundgren's barn and took the 5 members of the family to it one by one. They tied them, placed them in the pit, and
I still don't understand why they did this, though.
individually shot them. It wouldn't be until 8 months later that their bodies were discovered in the pit after a whistleblower came forward. Everyone involved was given extensive sentences. Most notably, Lundgren was sentenced to death by lethal injection. He was executed.
Side note, I know a dude who looks exactly like this. He's in jail, prison, whatever now for doing horrible things also. Um but yeah, he looks exactly like this dude. It's uncanny.
In 2006. Level 7. Rajneesh Movement. The Rajneesh Movement is a religious movement known for its ambitious take on life. While it primarily operates like a cult and has faced criticism for its controversial views, it also holds a degree of acceptance, particularly in India. Essentially, the Rajneesh movement lacks a strict set of shared values and encourages individuals to find their own paths. While these beliefs may sound noble, and are certainly less horrifying than some other cults, the actions of the Rajneeshis in a self-sufficient community in Wasco County, Oregon, were far from virtuous. The cult's open philosophy bred unchecked ambition, leading to the residents of Rajneeshpuram to attempt a political takeover of the county. However, after realizing that voting wouldn't favor them, largely due to their falling out with local residents, they turned to a more sinister tactic: bioterrorism. To suppress voter turnout, Rajneeshi members poisoned salad bars in 10 restaurants in the Delhi's using salmonella. This attack made 751 people sick and hospitalized 45, though fortunately no one died. It remains one of the largest bioterrorist attacks in U.S. history. The group didn't stop there. They also attempted to contaminate water supplies and even sprinkled salmonella cultures on grocery produce and urinals. Thankfully, these additional efforts didn't yield significant results. Ultimately, these crimes were traced back to Rajneesh's overly zealous and borderline dictatorial secretary, Ma Anand Sheila. She fled to Europe, but was eventually arrested, extradited, and convicted. Meanwhile, Bhagwan Rajneesh faced deportation for immigration fraud, and the commune fell apart. The Rajneeshi bioterror attack left hundreds sick and a community shaken. It stands as a reminder of how ambition and paranoia can lead cults to catastrophic violence.
Wow. Okay. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to subscribe, drop a like, hit the bell notification, all that good shit. And I will see you in the next one. Thanks for watching. Bye.